I'm recording, connecting to cloud server, perfect. If you are sending messages in the chat box, the panelists and myself will not be monitoring the chat box, but Megan is. However, we're really using the chat box for engagement purposes, and so for y'all to connect and engage with one another. And then if you have questions for the panel, or if you want someone to repeat something, we have a Q&A box as well. The Q&A box does allow for anonymous submissions, and so we tested that feature yesterday and we're able to submit some anonymous questions. And so if you would like questions answered, you can drop those in there. We do have a whole lot to cover, so I'm not sure how many of those questions we'll get to, but Megan is actually monitoring the chat feature as well as the Q&A box. Okay, let's begin. I created a poll that we're going to start with, just so that we can kind of gauge who the audience is, so that the panel has a better idea of who they are speaking with. So we're going to start with the poll really quick, and then I'll do their bios and get everything going. So the first question in the poll is, are you currently a member of We Lead? The second question is, what is your employment classification? Third question, do you identify as a person of color? And fourth question, what is your age range? And y'all should be able, do y'all see those results coming in? Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so hopefully that helps. All right, we're going to begin with their introductions. And one thing that is always just kind of makes me laugh, when you ask accomplished people to send you a short bio, they send you 47 sentences that you have to like cut down anyway. And so I had to recut down your bios because you all have done so much that I have cut it down to like 2 or 3 sentences. And so I'm going to start with Tess. Tess Johnson is a 22-year veteran in higher education with an 18 years of service here at Sam Houston State University. She recently accepted a position in the College of Osteopathic Medicine as Director of Medical Student Affairs. She also anticipates graduating this semester with a doctoral degree in higher education. Welcome, Tess. Thank you for being here. Okay. Maria Botero has a PhD in philosophy from York University in Canada. Her work focuses in interdisciplinary research in human and animal cognition. She is an associate professor in the psychology and philosophy department. Chelsea Smith recently graduated from SHSU with a Doctor of Education in Educational Leadership, Higher Education. She currently oversees all aspects of student engagement and retention and parent and family relations. She is also a Title IX decision maker and hearing officer. She's been married for 11 years and has a 9-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. Welcome. Gabriela Silvestre, PhD, identifies herself as a Latina within the Latin complex construct. She's originally from Argentina. She pursued her graduate education and PhD at the University of Pittsburgh. She has a PhD in Administrative and Policy Studies in Education with a concentration in Higher Education Administration. All of the things. Her areas of research are gender issues in higher education, women of color and PWIs, international reform policies of higher education, and students of color within higher education. So thank you, ladies, so much for being here today. Just to kind of give a lineup of today, because some of you watching are probably type A like I am, and you want to know, what are we going to talk about? How is this going to be laid out? And so we have 2 primary topics that we'll really cover today. The first is working in and through stereotypes for women of color. And then the second is professional challenges for women of color. I met with each panelist individually, some of them twice, and then we met collectively as a group and really kind of identified 3 professional challenges. And so we will discuss those, and then we do have quite a few questions that were submitted for Q&A that we'll actually be able to go over as well. So just so that you all kind of have an expectation for today. So starting with working in and through stereotypes for women of color, The panelists and I had really good discussions about what it means to be a person of color, and then specifically in higher education, and then specifically a woman. So multiple layers of kind of working in and through those stereotypes. And so we'll start with discussing what stereotypes have you faced in your career and how are you able to overcome and work through those. And so the floor is open to anyone who wants to start.
I'll start. So in our conversations, we've talked about stereotypes around Black women and being labeled an angry Black woman. And for me, I'm pretty loud, and I've been loud since, the beginning of my creation, pretty much. My mom has found old school records of mine from 3rd and 4th grade that says, Tesla's a great student, but she's very loud. And she talked too much. But those stereotypes, for us, even in our movement through life, I've had to kind of do some self regulation when it comes to that, because I know it is a stereotype. But then there are times where I really don't care, and I'm just going to be passionate about whatever it is I'm speaking about, and put that foot forward. Now, I may come back and at the end of that conversation and say something to the fact that I kind of put some type of caveat there that I am very passionate about that topic, and have a conversation about if I did come across as too aggressive when speaking about that. But and for me, and I realize it's there, and I know people handle things in their own way, but I am who I am, and I've not changed who I am for anyone. So that's kind of how I move through life. So I'll hand the floor over.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback on what you said, Tess, because it's absolutely correct. I think for me as a professional, even when I've just done a lot of leadership development, they talk about the difference between being aggressive and assertive. And those are some terms that I don't necessarily think are associated with men. I don't know that men have to know the difference between being aggressive and assertive. And being a woman of color also adds that extra layer like Tiffany was talking about, because if I do come off as too assertive or even aggressive, then I could be potentially labeled an angry Black woman. And so there's a very fine line that I feel that, I have been socialized growing up to walk because of that, and specifically in my professional career. And it's hard to, reconcile that with who you naturally are as a person. My colleagues will tell you I'm naturally a direct person. Being direct doesn't necessarily make me assertive or aggressive, but because I'm direct, that's just the way that it's perceived. And so like Tess said, you have to sometimes be like, oh, I'm just passionate about that or this or that, which it's unfortunate because you need to be as authentic as you can be all the time. But we do have to, it's difficult. It's something we have to learn how to navigate. And I'm open to hearing other people's thoughts and interested in any questions about that, because it's something I'm still learning as a professional how to be.
Yeah.
Yes, and I would agree with what my colleagues have just said. I think I have heard it all about me being aggressive or assertive, angry, and shouting. And there was an evolution also professionally about that. At the beginning, it was a crippling statement when I would hear something like this. But then as my own professional identity and sort of like coming together, that I could bring a different perspective, and I could speak and have to be listened to. I started to be less worried about that. And sometimes I do, as you were explaining before, I sort of spell it out. I'm passionate. I speak with my hands. I used to be a history teacher, so I'm always going to shout. You can imagine that. Yeah, that's, I think that those stereotypes are as painful when you could see that they are happening or they are being misconstructed. But also the aftermath of them, because those are the ones that affect you if you let them. That's why, professionally, and connecting with these sort of how we respond to those in the field. It happened to me last week that I expressed a question at a meeting, and people started in the middle of the Zoom meeting to write back saying, "Oh, I understand that you're frustrated." And I was like, "No, I'm not frustrated. I'm just expressing my opinion." And I don't apologize anymore. I just explain. That's my opinion. So yes, I think it's also a development that you go through about this.
I think my experience has been, so I identify as a part of the Latinx culture, and one of the complexities is that that word is an umbrella term that encompasses so many different backgrounds. So in a way, it plays a little bit into our advantage because people are not exactly sure how to treat us. And because a lot of people have terrible geography knowledge. I was born in Colombia, but a lot of people think I'm from Mexico or I'm from France, or they're all over the place. And on top of that, I find it that it's very difficult to distinguish my background, my cultural background, from the fact that I am self-identify as a woman. So a lot of the times when I'm treated, I'm not sure which is responsible for this kind of treatment that I'm receiving. I know that sometimes people who come, particularly women who come from a Latina culture, are expected to be sweet and nice. And one thing that drives me crazy is this, because they think we are from a Latin culture, they come and try to kiss us in both cheeks to show that they're very international. It's like, whoa, 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 I don't know you. Like, you're not, no, personal space. So some things are plain weird like that. Others are they expecting that you are all these sweet and nices. And when you try to behave in a professional matter of, I'm not sweet and nice, I'm here to work and here are your responsibilities, they're like, oh, you're so cold and you're so, or I had, and this was very sad, it was a woman who actually did this to me when I was trying to defend the rights of faculty and something that I thought it was illegal. I was told, oh, you care too much about faculty. And I was treated like I was mothering them. You care too much about them. Actually, she called me faculty lover, faculty defender, and you oversympathize too much. So again, I'm not sure where to trace the line between gender and background. I think these two things go mixed, but for sure they come in. What to do about it, that is a very complex. I think it depends a lot on the circumstances, the context. Unfortunately, we have to recognize that they are different levels of power. And I hope that as an institution, we make progress towards that, and understanding that the people who are in position of power are really not giving much of a choice to the people who have less power. So this conversation needs to be happened. If you are in a place, I would say, where you feel safe, because I think that's important and comfortable, you should definitely speak out and explain, listen, this is another way of speaking and addressing the world. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, but please consider this part of a normal interaction with me. But I do not recommend that you do this if you're not feeling safe, because sometimes the backlash could be terrible. And unfortunately, there are not that many mechanisms to protect you on that respect.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I do want to go further into that, but I just got some information. So Megan said that for the participants, I think it's a Zoom feature to highlight the speaker only. And so unless the panelist is speaking, I think that is the way that it's supposed to be. It was kind of like that on the town hall today. Whenever one of the admin was talking, you could only see that person. So we hear you and we see you. I think it is a Zoom thing. And then you all were curious about the results from the poll because you don't have access to seeing them. And so 62% of the people in attendance today are members of We Lead, which is great. We are at 21% faculty, 79% staff. 56% identify as a person of color, 44% do not. And then our kind of average age ranges are 30s to 50s. So I did want to share that because we had some comments that y'all couldn't see those results. So I wanted to share that with you. One thing that we kind of talked about that I want to just kind of go into a little bit more in regards to the stereotypes. One of the things that we kind of all made reference of is just the idea that when a person of color shares their opinion, all of the things that you have been said, we're told that we're loud, we're told that we're angry Black women, we are aggressive and assertive and we're shouters and all of these things. However, it seems to be kind of prevalent that if I'm just going to say a white lady were to do or say the same things, that they are kind of classified as expressive versus saying, oh, she's angry or she's really loud or she's assertive or whatever. And so I guess kind of what do we think is the difference in between a person of color and a non-person of color kind of expressing that opinion that would be the same if it was coming from, you know, kind of the other. And how do we kind of work towards being able to like stop the labeling of those things?
That's a really good question, Tiffany. I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying in terms of how we are socialized as people, you know, and I mean, I'm not a sociologist. I don't have any idea of how we are grown up through our society with the stereotypes and the different things that apply to different races or genders. But I think that, you know, we have heard a lot about allyship right now. So one of the things that I would say that if there is a non-person of color who witnesses that type of stereotyping or microaggression, if they were to say, you know what, Chelsea, I appreciate your opinion. Thank you for being expressive, and model what it looks like potentially in the group setting. That may be a solution to try to help with that. I think there's a lot of training that needs to occur potentially to just make people aware that that is something that's out there. I know we're doing some different things on the diversity, equity, and inclusion front, which is all great. So I think the more that we get that message out and we can start understanding each other, the better our culture will be long term. But it's going to take a long, probably process cultural shift within the workplace, if that makes sense. So.
And I think that one of the items that is very interesting, speaking about when you're in a class or when you're in a meeting and you have another woman, but this woman self-identifies as white, there are other kind of microaggressions that sometimes people don't even think about. So for example, I have an accent and I make a lot of grammar mistakes. And I hear myself making them, but it doesn't matter. Or I try to pronounce a word and it doesn't come out right. And I'm hearing it's like, no, that's not right, but it's coming anyway like that. And you would see people in the room correcting your grammar, or when you're doing a document, correcting grammar for you. So that kind of patronizing way is in a way a racial comment. And basically I started now, I don't like the idea that because you self-identify as a minority, you need to educate everybody. That is not your job, that is your choice. So it has been my choice lately to start educating people. And one way that I noticed that is a little bit less threatening is if you do it in an abstract way. So instead of saying to that person, stop correcting me, please, that is offensive, you rather casually in another conversation mention, oh, you know what? Some people don't realize that correcting grammar in a professional setting it could be considered a microaggression. A lot of us are working in a second language and it's incredibly difficult and challenging, and we're doing our best as long as the meaning is conveyed. I honestly don't see that. And you throw it to the general. Mm-hmm. I completely agree with Chelsea. I think one of the worst, it was not a microaggression. I sometimes had a very direct aggression happening to me, and friends of mine were sitting there and nobody did anything. I think that one of the things that we need to make clear is that you're morally wrong for performing an action, but you're also morally wrong if you sit there and watch an action. I broke friendships after that because I don't think it's morally right. So yes, if if it's not any threat to yourself, I do believe that you should speak for others and use the privilege that you have on behalf of others that may not be feeling comfortable. So that would be my second advice.
We had a question come in that I do want to address. So one of them is just a quick information. Can you talk about the idea of microaggression so that everyone is on the same playing field as to what it is?
Those are the ones that happen in everyday life and are normalized from those who commit those microaggressions, but they are felt as an aggression if you are a person from an underrepresented group, or they entail some sort of misconception, diminishing, distinction of less of value or skills of a person who is from a particular underrepresented groups. Even if somebody mentions general statements, but it's a conversation with us as a person, for example, as a Latina person, that's a clear microaggression. But they happen almost sometimes they are very ostensively shown, but some others are in the conversations, in the ways in which people interact with you. And they again, I think that the everyday daily aspect of it's what makes it as such.
Tess, you had a story that I wanted you to follow up on, just in terms of, I think a lot of times when Black women or even Black men, sometimes I have been told that I am articulate and well-spoken.
Yes.
I should be. I have a master's degree. I went to college, so I should be able to articulate myself and speak well. And so you had a similar story that I wanted for you to be able to
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think allyship is very important. And I want to piggyback on what my fellow panelists have said, that is very important. However, I do feel when the opportunity presents itself, it is important to be, and if you feel empowered to, because sometimes we aren't in a place where we feel empowered to speak to people about something that they said that may have offended. And so a few of my tribe mates and I have a tribe, on campus. And so one of my tribe members, I told her a few years ago that I am going to make it a point to educate people in a very professional way, but privately, if they say something that may offend. So in a few instances, I've been in a social situation at work where a white person would say that a Black person was well-spoken and articulate. Okay. As opposed to what? Then there's the question as compared to what? Like, that person has a PhD, so you're surprised that they're well-spoken and articulate? And forgive me, I'm very direct and very myself at all times, like I said in the beginning of this panel. And so that calls for a conversation as to why you decided to say that. Did you say that about the other candidates who were Caucasian? Did you use those same terms? So the well-spoken articulate is a microaggression that is blaring, like flashing red light. And so it's okay to pull people aside and say, and ask them, why did you choose those words? Why did you say that? That was offensive. And I would encourage you not to use that language in the future. And so just being empowered in that way and really pulling people to the side. Now, I do feel like, and I agree with Dr. Botero here on the fact that, you know, people need to be educated, and sometimes friendships may need to sever, you know, if people are not open, if they're not, if they don't feel like it's important to learn about that, you know, and that's something that they're not open to. So I completely agree with the panel, and I do believe education is key here, and that we should move forward, and people should take it upon themselves to be educated on these subjects.
So we talked a little bit about, as the person who is on the receiving end of the microaggression, being able to either call it out or address it. And so one of the follow-up questions says, oftentimes people find it difficult to discuss race and kind of issues of race, especially in the workplace, and then probably more appropriately right now in the racial climate that we're in. For someone who has a genuine interest and getting to know you or learning more about you or the issue or advocating for you, what does approaching you or approaching an area about race in this kind of climate that we're in, and at the workplace, how do you see people being able to approach those issues?
I would like to add to that, I think it's not only on the level of faculty and staff, but it's also on the level of students, which worries me quite a bit. I teach a class that is about ethics, and I have very vocal students, and they talk a lot, and then we get to race and zip, nobody wants to say anything. And that worries me a little bit, because if we don't have these conversations, we'll never make progress. I think I would like to just add two things. I want to say first, a warning, a common sense warning. Be polite and use your common sense. Do not bombard us. I mean, I appreciate your enthusiasm. I appreciate your questions. I appreciate your interest, but use common sense. Think of how would you feel if you get bombarded on personal questions about what is your life like and what is your experience. And a lot of these are very sensitive topics that I may choose not to share with you. I'm an oversharer, but for a lot of people, it's your private life. And this includes surveys sometimes. I have to call my colleagues, like, have great intentions of doing surveys, but it's like, this is a delicate topic and not everybody may be willing to answer this. So let's think very carefully how we're going to do this and what we're going to do with this information. But also, I think that is, I also think that, so first is a warning about don't be too intrusive. Use your common sense. But the second one is, I think I like these conversations, but I always try to think of them from a place of empathy, because I myself had made very stupid comments in my life. And you know what? And people have to talk to me, or I see it and feel horribly embarrassed. And I always try to approach it from a place of empathy of, you know what? Don't worry. If you made a mistake, I've been there, and I appreciate you trying to do this analysis of what's going on and talking to me. So start from a place of honesty. If it's something that is hurtful, if it's something that is uncomfortable, start by there. Share your feelings and give me the option of answering this or very politely declining, nothing personal, but it is part of my personal life. For some reason, the image that I have when I do this is, I remember when I was expecting my son, and you know how when women are expecting, people, all of a sudden your body becomes like public property. Mm-hmm. And everybody thinks it's okay to touch your belly. I walk through supermarkets everywhere like this, like, I dare you to touch me. And it's like that. A lot of these issues are very personal, and the fact that I am self-identified as a minority doesn't give me everybody the right to peel in my personal life, but also approach it. So, but if you approach it with common sense and from a place of empathy, I think that could be the beginning of a really nice conversation.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I love that point, Dr. Botero. Some alternative ways to educate yourself may just be obviously practicing empathy, but reading. reading books. I mean, there is Brene Brown's The Power of Vulnerability. She talks about empathy and learning about other people's struggle and examples and things like that. There's White Fragility and all these other types of topical books that you can take and read and learn about what it is to understand how it is to be a non-minority and a minority from both viewpoints. The women, and I forget the woman who wrote White Fragility, I'm listening to it right now on Audible just to learn for myself, but both of these people are white women, Brene Brown as well, but they speak to the impact of what their roles have been in the lives of minorities, and then also what they have learned from minority women across the board. So I would say if you're interested in getting to learn a little bit about how to be better educated, be sensitive, learn about race, you can start by, go into DEI stuff that we have across campus, attending things like the We Lead session today, but also just trying to read and get educated about how to approach those sensitive topics.
And let me say one more thing. I think that, and just to piggyback on what has been said and just adding my own little spin to this, when it comes to asking about culture and asking people about their lived experiences, I don't want to say ask people for permission first instead of asking, is it okay? I'm open. I'm an oversharer. Everybody that knows me knows that I'm an oversharer. And I think there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into being a woman of color. Period. That intersection between being a woman and being Black or being Latina is like, there's a lot of emotional labor that plays into that. And just keep that in mind, even though I am very much so an oversharer, and I'm okay with, I had a faculty member, I don't know, about a month ago, and we were talking about data, and the data said, Black, but for some reason, there was some uncomfortableness in that word. It was like, okay, well, I keep saying Black, 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 Black. Okay. And they were like, is that okay? And I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't it be? And it was kind of like, well, the question needed to be asked, what do you identify as? And I would have said Black, but, PC is African American in people's minds, and I'm okay with talking about that and educating people about that. Now, do I want to talk about it all day? No, but I'm okay with having a conversation, and that's and having that question asked, I would have answered it, and then the uncomfortableness of that conversation could have been left at the door. And so, just kind of keep that in mind, that people are okay with you asking, but don't overstep. And if they say, no, I don't want to discuss it, respect that. I'm a firm believer in people need people. Like, we need each other. People need people. And if we just kind of go with that in mind and treat people how we want to be treated, then you'll go so much further in life. And just keep that in mind, and really take it upon yourself to educate yourself. True. However, if that person is open, ask the question and find out. So, that's all I had to say about that. Thank you.
I agree with that, Tess. I'm okay with anybody asking. Did you want me to answer the question real quick, Tiffany? I saw that.
Yes, so we do have a question in the box. They wanted to know the name of the book, if Chelsea would share that again.
So the first one is called The Power of Vulnerability, and it's by Brene Brown. And I believe it may just be like an Audible or audio recording book. It's fabulous. And the next one is called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. So.
Thank you.
For those who want to see.
There, well, yeah. Your background's kind of covering it up.
Dr. Silvestre has it, yeah. It says for white people who want to talk about racism. Is that the rest of it? Yeah. Yes. So
for white people, why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism.
And hopefully that helps answer the question about how to approach those conversations.
I do agree with what Chelsea has said, that, today is a good place to start. You're starting here, and I think this really does kind of open the door for you having conversations with the panelists or conversations with other people across campus that are attending the session. So we are going to move on to the professional challenges that we have identified, but I do want to answer one of the questions out of the box. One of the questions that have been submitted in the Q&A box says, how do you deal with the problem of man-interrupting, like men interrupting? Do you see it as a prevalent against women of color, women, or is this just a thing?
Well, first of all, I would like to acknowledge that, you know, we work in higher education or at higher education institutions, and these institutions are male dominated. I mean, that's for me like an acknowledgement first. The other piece is that, yes, I think it has this component of gender, and when intersected, and I think Tess and Dr. Botero have talked about, with the intersection of race and gender, you have there the perfect storm. I think it's important as women, we speak to that. And I imagine that many of us have gone through sometimes traumatic experiences with male colleagues. And I think from that perspective, they see gender first. And of course, the other intersections make it even worse. So, but again, you know, I approach also from a theoretical perspective. And by this notion of intersectionality, you know, there is no oppression or hierarchy of oppression. That no, it's not that you are oppressed more because you're a woman, or, you know, what comes first? Like, because you're a person of color or because you're a woman? I think they are combined too. But I think we also need to be very aware that we, as much as our institutions are predominantly white institutions, they are also male-dominated institutions, with the codes, the symbols, the type of discourse that comes with that.
Anybody else want to add anything? Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say I just had a situation like this yesterday, and I was talking to a colleague of mine. I didn't know if it was because I was a woman or if it was because I was Black or a Black woman. So it doesn't stop. There's layers to all of that, and it is intersected. I have a strong faith. And so I bring a lot of that into how I react or respond to those types of men interrupting. I think that was the word that we used. And I try to have a lot of self-discipline and control, just because of how I was raised. But I think that if there's an appropriate time, if we need to, as women, to make clear that I'm speaking like we are. And may I continue what I wanted to say? Can I finish my thought? Is that, let me do that. And in a respectful way, but, because I don't know that men, if this is a thing, even realize that they're doing that. And maybe they do, is it conscious? Is it unconscious? Is it to men only, or not to men and women? So anyways, I think that it's okay for us to try to claim back our time and say, I would like to finish my thought, and then you can definitely go on with what you were saying. So I want to encourage and maybe empower people to do that.
I remember the first time I experienced that was when I was a TA, and I was in Canada, and then I had this male student come and ask me, he was not happy about a grade I gave him in a test. And he started getting very loud and in my personal space. And I'm like, I find myself like going behind, and then all of a sudden I thought, like, you know what? I grew up in Bogota. I've been mugged twice. I'm not gonna get this guy scared me. And then now in my professional life, I work with chimpanzees, and I've been in Africa, and chimpanzees have beat me up. And I always think, like, you know what? I've seen worse than you. I've been attacked by a chimpanzee, so I'm not gonna be scared. And what you do is, from an animal behavior perspective, you basically get a body posture, you stake your territory, and exactly like Chelsea said, you basically firmly said, I'm sorry, I am going to finish what I'm saying, then you can have your turn, and very firmly and politely. Now, what I was saying earlier is that I'm discovering new, more subtle ways of doing this. That I'm kind of mastering with the whole, like, I think of the worst, toughest thing I ever done, and that empowers me, and I get the posture, and I sort of say my piece. But I'm noticing that there's other more subtle ones. Like I have this colleague that every time we're in a departmental meeting, if I make a point, a point that I think is important, and I say A, B, C, my colleague immediately talks after me and says A prime. And then everybody in the meeting goes, oh, he said A prime. Oh, he's so brave. He's so smart. I'm thinking, I just said that. And it's interesting to notice that not only the man explaining, interrupting, but also sometimes there's a more subtle one, and a lot of people participate of the man is the one who is heard. And sometimes you pitch one idea and nobody hears you, but the man then takes it over, adds a tiny, tiny variation, and oh, the genius who's saving us. That I don't know. I honestly, I'm just discovering that more subtle one, but I think it's equally frustrating. So going back to what to do with that, think of the most powerful thing you have done, the most toughest thing that you've done, because women, we have it tough. I'm sorry, I don't mean to rape gender, but we have to do a lot of things. We're talking about in, I think one of the questions of the hats we wear, if we decide to become mothers, embrace that, know who you are, and use that, and immediately your body posture changes. It's amazing. And this is basic animal observation. Your body posture changes, your tone changes, direct eyesight, and stand your ground. And usually people, and it's a very basic primate thing, they react to that. The subtles, I have no idea.
So much to unpack. I do want to move forward. We have some really good questions in the chat box. I will come back, or in the Q&A box. I will come back to that because I do want to make sure that we cover the professional challenges. So through our conversations that we have had, we identified 3 professional challenges for women of color. And so we're going to discuss those. The first of those is mentoring. The second is community, being understood and kind of finding your people. And then the third is kind of being that token diversity educator in your space. And so we will start with mentoring. So it's open to the floor, anyone who wants to start with the challenge of finding a mentor.
One of the things I think we talked when we met too, is the fact that research about supporting and getting to know the issues women face at institutions of higher education is precisely mentoring, and how crucial it's been, and it's been discovered through research that mentoring for women in higher education is recognized as one of the key aspects that make a female faculty member progress, be successful in her career, and become part of the institution, and reduces these culturally institutional aggressions to, or feeling of not belonging to. So I think it's essential. Mentoring, it's vital for making a female professional be part of the institution, and it has to be systematic. It has to be institutionalized. It's not enough just to not even have anyone assigned, or having somebody assigned to work with you when you start working at an institution of higher education. We need that because it's shown that we need to also understand the codes that this place presents, and add the fact that you are a female to the fact that you belong to an underrepresented group too, and again the intersectionality piece. So I'm a fervent proponent of mentoring, systematic systems. But again, you know, sometimes they don't exist. And this is when I personally, for example, I have reached out to professional associations, any professional association related to either research in higher ed or professionals in higher ed in general. Those associations like NESPA, ASH, to get that mentoring that unfortunately in all the institutions I have joined as a faculty member, there were no systems of systematic mentoring available. So I reached out to those institutions who have those systems, who have programs for it. And I've been very lucky because those are the mentoring experiences that I've had. And I currently, I'm in a mentoring program from TACHE, which is the Association of Chicanos and Latinos in Texas, working in higher education. And it is through that program that I have an individual mentoring who's a woman and a Latina. And it's been phenomenal. I mean, really in my professional life and experiences, it's a before and after. And I think that's what we need, you know, a system of mentoring.
I would have to agree with that. It's something that I've talked about to my colleagues about for a very long time. And that being a part of the onboarding process for faculty and staff, and that there be a list of folks on the campus who have identified themselves as wanting to be a mentor to someone who's new to the university. Now, I think there is a limitation for someone like me or someone who has a number of years of experience, but is still wanting to grow as a professional. There's a limitation when I'm wanting someone with maybe more experience or someone who shares my same background and culture, who wants to pour into me. And so I've looked to grow myself in those ways. And so I've kind of not, you know, taken advice from people in other areas at other universities, just like Dr. Silvestre said. However, you know, having an identified mentor, especially at my current institution, has been a real limitation for me. I wish those systems were in place, especially for new folks who are new to the university. And don't know how to navigate areas. I mean, you get that from where you are, but you know, there's those other questions about the community and resources that maybe your department doesn't have an idea about, you know. And so I know that HR is working on something, and they have started things that process. But I believe that having maybe, and I'm working towards it now, an employee resource group, or and those just like We Lead and others could set up a mentorship system within its organization. So it's just a thought.
I was just going to add, one of the things that we talked about is, I guess, the longer that you have been in the profession, the more difficult it is to find a mentor, because you are probably at an assistant director level or up, and you typically tend to want a mentor who is levels higher than you, and then you want a mentor who is a woman. And now we're adding a layer of now also wanting a mentor who is layers up, a woman and a woman of color. And so it just makes it increasingly difficult to be mentored by someone who looks like you. Of course, I know that everyone is open and available to being mentored by someone who doesn't look like them. But I think there's a lot of shared experiences also that we kind of talked about before, and wanting to be able to be mentored by a woman of color it just becomes increasingly difficult. I don't know if that's a higher education thing or if that's, our time and place in our location. But I had kind of seen some comments come in, and so I wanted to address that. We understand, and I think we had talked about and seen, we know that there are university mentorships available. It's just that they're adding layers to a lot of those things. So I wanted to make sure that that was mentioned. That kind of brings into the second professional challenge that we have discussed, and that is finding a sense of community on campus, and really connecting and being understood and kind of finding your people. Tess, you did kind of open the door to talk about the Black ERG, and so I would like to start with you, if that's okay. And then we had a couple of questions that came in about that as well. And so let's talk about community.
Okay, so let me just give you a little bit of history about me. I came from a community college, and so at a community college, we were, you have a family. It's kind of a family atmosphere, and I know everybody. And so what I've done at Sam Houston, just because of my personality, is as I've taken that community college mindset and applied it here. So I know a lot of people because I'm social. I love talking to people, and that's just me. That's my love language, is talking. So anyways, so I have a tribe, but I know there are folks that are on this campus that don't have that. And so creating that community and resource for Black people or African Americans, or however you may identify, having a place for that. And so I'm in the midst now of creating a Black faculty, staff, employee resource group, and outlining what that will look like, and in the many ways that it could be developed, but creating that community in that way, because we are so spread out and the university is so large. And I want to make sure that our faculty and staff have a resource that they know they could always go to outside of those other main areas. So that is in the works. And so hopefully within the next few months, we'll have that launched.
I would just say also, in the meantime, I go back to what you're doing today, Tiffany, with We Lead and some of the other things that are happening across campus. I don't know if there's like a calendar of events or something like that can be spread out for people to, plug in and figure out what they can do and what they can learn. And I know we miss the days of being in person, but if we can't do that, how do we get on these type of sessions and get to know each other and start building that community right now from the ground up? You know what I mean? So I love the work that Tess is doing, and I know that there's other groups like that. But in the meantime, if there's, Tiffany, if y'all can maybe research if there's things out there and then let us know, I think that would be great, because I'm interested in getting to learn more and be around people who I haven't met before and start building community. Didn't mean to put you to work. Sorry, I saw you taking that.
I'm like, any other comments about community, or do we want to go to the third one? Okay. The third professional challenge that we talked about was, and Dr. Botero actually talked about this a little bit earlier, is being the token diversity educator in the spaces that you are in, whether it's at work or it's like in a meeting specifically, or in your office or department. A lot of times women of color feel as though whenever an issue happens or there's something to be discussed, that they are the token kind of diversity educator that's responsible for kind of catching everyone up to speed. So I'll open the floor for that.
Can I start by saying, could people please call me Maria? I'm feeling very self-conscious about the doctor thing. And I know there's this culture in this university and I hate it. And I always like, call me Maria, please call me Maria. Well, since I mentioned this, it's, okay, we talk about oversharing. Let's overshare a little bit. I always felt very self-conscious about that, because my entire academic career, people have tried to say that anything that I got or have is because I played the minority card, right? So, for example, I work in my PhD, I work with one of the best faculty members that was at the time, and he got a huge grant, and I benefit from that grant, and that's what paid my trip to Africa. And then he asked me to coordinate a group. I was coordinating a group, and then I hear one of the faculty members start making very inappropriate jokes about romantic relationships with the supervisors and students. And you know, one of those loud jokes that are meant to be heard. And I was like, do you think that I'm not able to work with him just because I am a woman and I have a relation with him? Like, I didn't, by the way. So there's kind of like these suggestions of, so I think, and I became biased in my own way, I became very scared of this. And to demonstrate that they're not hiring me because I am a Latina or because I am a woman. You're hiring me because you like my work, and my work is interesting and engaging. And I think that I overcorrected. And for a while, I stepped back and try not to bring attention to the fact that that was going on. Now, interesting enough, I seem to have passed by, and a lot of people did not identify me as a Latina, which is very strange. But then I start seeing people who were hired after me, and they were taken as the token. And all of a sudden I was using as the token female. So I noticed, for example, my particular college was very concerned about the numbers of males versus females. And then they start hiring more women, and they're like, oh, look at us. We have the statistics. There's this number of women. And then the previous dean hired, now I'm very conscious of using this term, 2 African Americans in my department. And she showcased them like, look at us, how great we're doing. We're putting our money where our mouth is. And I'm thinking, really? You're not hiring them because they are fantastic scholars. I've seen their work and it's amazing. Why are you doing this? And of course, I realized that it was because it looked her as an administrative position, it looks really good. And then I became very frustrated because there were no measures to support this. So for example, they're very, very much working on hiring women, but we don't have a parental leave at the university. So what kind of support are you giving back for that? Like they're hiring, I feel sometimes that they collect us like collecting cards, and they can say, okay, I have one of each and look how diverse I am. But I don't think that people are following up with those things. So I think what bothers me is, it bothers me on the one hand that I think sometimes, I don't think I hide my identity. As philosophers, we complicate everything, and I don't know what my identity is. I don't know if there's a personal self to start with. Don't get me started on that. But I find that identity is very complicated, and I don't fully understand exactly who I am, and I'm still a work in progress. But I find it very, very disencouraging that people are treated like the token. Oh, we have one of those. And it's so objectifying people, and it just makes me feel so incredibly sad to see people being treated that way. So whenever I see this, it's one of the things that I speak up. And so far, I don't think they've used me more in gender. But yes, I think this is one of the dangers, because people believe that they're doing something and the remedy is there, and we're very diverse now. And we stop thinking and having conversations about it just because there is statistically more hires in the way they want it to look.
So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about what Maria said in different terms of being the token person. And this may be a little bit extreme, but I remember right after the George Floyd incident, everybody wanted to speak with a person of color about how they were feeling. And I remember listening to people of color saying, I'm tired, I'm spent, don't talk to me, I don't want to talk about it, I'm processing this, I'm figuring it out. And so this is just kind of a question to everybody, you know, that's here today, kind of piggybacking on that. What is our role when it comes to that? Are we the token person that has to go and teach everybody about systemic racism? And what kind of burden is that? You know what I mean? And are we the ones that have to go and explain what it is to be Black in America and so on and so forth? So I think that's a further conversation, and very interesting, Tiffany, for that, the viewpoint that was brought up in the question, because it's very complex is what I'm trying to say. It's not just one dimensional, whether you're the token Latina woman, Latinx woman, you know, the woman versus the man, you know, there's so many things to that. So I hope that makes sense. Tess, do you understand?
Yes, I completely understand. However, and I'm just going to be completely transparent here and be an oversharer. No one in my workplace discussed anything with me about what was happening in the world. And of course, there was a lot of emotional labor for me surrounding that, especially I have 3 adult sons who move about and drive and work in the world or attend school or in college. And so it is, you know, I worry as a mother for sure about my own children. However, you know, we are, and I've spoken to some other colleagues in higher education at other universities about this, and you know, we're attending Zoom meetings. We are attending to activities related to our job. People are still asking for deliverables. People are still asking for outcomes. They're still asking for charts, right? And we are processing that, all of that that is happening around us and in the world internally. And so having a place to express ourselves is important. And so, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to create the ERG as a part of the function of the ERG, not the entire thing, but because we need a space for that. And people need to have a safe space to express themselves when something like that is happening. And so, but I completely agree with you, Chelsea. And I don't consider myself to be the educator, and I don't want to be all the time. You know, and just taking it back down to something very, very simple as our hair. Okay, so because I am an oversharer and I'm very social, and you know, and that's who I am, and I'm okay with that. But you know, I wear my hair curly most of the time. Of course, you know, I have braids now, but um, if I don't put product in my hair, like it's really short. But if I put product in my hair, if I put gel in my hair, it's really long. And then there's a conversation when I don't put gel in my hair about, oh, did you get a haircut? Like, no. Then there's a whole education as to what's happening with my hair. And that's okay to ask, and I will answer. However, I just require a question. Is it okay? Can I ask you about your hair? You know, and so and so it's one of those things that I think is very small, but it can be tiring. And the other thing I want to put out there is related to hair, but please don't touch our hair. Just FYI. Love you, but don't touch our hair.
So there's a lengthy question that I want to read in its entirety because I don't want to mess it up. And it's from a woman who identifies as early 20s and 30s. So it says, I'm going to move this over here so I can look this way. Okay, it says this can be answered at a different time, but Tiffany has chosen to do it now. I'm curious for women in their mid 20s to early 30s who are really getting into the field and starting their career. What advice would you give them about being aware of themselves as a woman of color in the workplace? Upbringing plays a lot in how much a person develops, so not all experiences are the same, but things that happen, like the murder of George Floyd, happened and everyone was in the same reality in a way. It's not like people existed in 2 separate instances of the world when it happened. Race may not have been prominent in the same kind of way it is now. What do women entering the work field do when this awareness changes? So lots of things.
I don't want to be the only one talking. However, as a young professional, I mean, it just depends on where you are. And in some of my experiences, I have been empowered to say things and do things and start things. But in other instances, I have not been empowered to do that. And so it just depends on how comfortable you are and who you are as a person, and how and how you would move about your workplace in that professional setting, and as it relates to the now wokeness of everyone, right? And how much you want to contribute it to their wokeness, right? And so it really depends. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it, because I would say what I would do, but I also know that we're all very different, and we all have very different experiences, and we all digest and work through things in our own way. And so I want to leave it at that, because I don't think I have I don't want to go too specific.
That's such a very complex question. The only thing I wanted to say, and then Maria, you can go, is that it's really awesome that whoever this young woman is has identified this already and is asking that type of question. I would say lean into that, trying to figure out that understanding, and that will be for the betterment of all women at this institution. So I like the awareness, the self-reflection and self-awareness with the question. I'm like, Tess, it's so complex. I really need to digest it and read it. I'm a reader. And so I like having things in front of me to digest it, but keep leaning into that. And let's hope that many people start to want to answer that question for themselves.
I want to join to say that that's an amazing question. And you know what? I think you're absolutely right. You are entering a workspace that is radically different. I think the world has changed so much in the past 5 years. I remember at some point when, I'm going to go there, Obama was a president. And we were all like so hopeful that, you know what, things are going great. And I remember this woman came to give a presentation in my department. And then she said, there is sometimes danger in being hopeful. I'm like, what? And she mentioned at the time, we are very hopeful now, but look, this is just masquerading a lot of inequalities and racism that is still going on in this country. And then she started going on some inequalities in terms of housing and income and education. And I remember like, wow, she's right. And then the world became a whole different world. I mean, think of what we've gone in the last year, the current administration, how polarized we are right now. And how it has become appropriate in some contexts to say things that are incredibly racist, incredibly hurtful. And then on the other hand, we have people wanting to talk about these things finally and not hoping and thinking that everything is okay. So yes, your world is a radically new world. Your world is nothing like any of the worlds that we entered here, because it was a different dynamic. Some people were hypocrites, which I miss dearly, hypocrism and pretending they're a different person. Honestly, I see nothing wrong with that. I wish people still were polite enough to keep their thoughts for their dinners at home privately. But we are in that world, and it's permissible to say things that were unthinkable 4 years ago. So I think, I honestly don't know where we're going, because things are so crazy. And of course, add COVID to all of this, right? Where we're not seeing each other. And again, going from my experience in primates, when you don't have that face-to-face, their social dynamics change radically. So I would say this is one of the things that my impression, and again, I'm experiencing this from a very different perspective that some of my panelists here are experiencing, but I would say be very aware and open your eyes and read, as Chelsea said before, have a community, as Tess is suggesting, to help you navigate, because honestly, I don't think anybody has a script of what's going on right now and what is going to happen in the next years. And I think in terms of labor, in terms of the place of women, in terms of the rights of women, in terms of the rights of minorities, we're gonna see a lot of changes still coming on, unfortunately. So what I would say is, first, self-care. Be very careful with yourself. Try to be in a safe place. Second, I think Tessa's advice is spot on. Create a group where you feel comfortable. My personal perspective is that sometimes this group cannot be delineated by race or gender. I had horrible women attack me in ways that I thought, but you should understand how hard this is, and no. And I have wonderful men that have understood exactly the struggles that I've gone. So choose wisely, choose with your head, use with experience, trust your gut. And what Chelsea said, educate yourself and be prepared, because yes, your workplace is nothing like we've seen before, and you're going to have to be smart, careful, but don't do it alone, because we are a group, and that's the whole point of these kind of events. We can, as a group, I think is our best shot.
Maria, I have a question I want to kind of throw back at you that came in the chat box. And it just says, I would like to know how others feel about speaking Spanish in the workplace. It is my heart language. And so if you could just kind of talk about that and being in the workplace, and then we can open the floor. I think Gabby, we have lost her a couple times. She has bad internet connection. She came back and then we lost her again. So we didn't kick her out or anything for saying the wrong thing. We just kind of lost her because of internet. So Maria, back to you.
Well, again, that's what I was saying, identity is an interesting thing. Actually, my full name is not Maria. My full name is, and everybody who's here who has a Latinx background will get the joke, is Maria del Pilar, and wait, I'm not done, Botero Jaramillo. That is my full name, right? And I have a tilde on the I, and I'm too lazy to put the tilde because I have to go insert symbol, blah, blah, blah. And when I arrived to Canada, the administrative assistant called me Maria, and I thought, that's what my mom calls me, fair enough. So I become Maria, I become Maria, I become Mary, I become Marie in a French accent. And I've gone through that. So it's kind of interesting. I remember somebody who used to be an elite and is one of the people that I love dearly, Bernice Strauss, who started Elite in this program. And I remember I was here in my first week, and I came from York, which is a very interdisciplinary, multicultural university. Everybody's from everywhere. It's awesome. And then I moved to Sam Houston. This was my first job. And in my department, I was the only person that had an accent. In fact, in my college first meeting, I look around, I was the only person with an accent. And I'm starting to feel like, as we say in Spanish, a cockroach in the milk, or a mosquito in the milk. Like, I was like, whoa, I'm different all of a sudden. And I remember having like probably had this very sad face, and I'm walking down the elevator, and then I run into Bernice. And Bernice asked me what's happening. And I said, Bernice, I feel so out of place here. Like, look, with my little accent, with my grammar mistakes, and you know, I'm weird. I don't look like everybody else. I've never experienced this before. And then she, in her Bernice way, she told me, Maria, that's great. That's what you should do. These kids should be hearing this and should be hearing that, and see that experience and see that there's more to than what they've been presented. And you know what? That has become a motto. So right now, when I'm going classes, I pronounce my name properly. I still don't use the tilde because I'm still very lazy, but I do pronounce my name properly. And I use Spanish words when they need to be Spanish words. And I tell stories about my parents and how gender divide our meetings are, where the women cook and the men talk. Meanwhile, women wash dishes, and I find that infuriating. And I tell them all these sort of stories. And when I have students who are speaking Spanish in the class, I kind of repeat that. I pronounce her name with the proper accent, and I try to show them how interesting it is that I had a student today, and we were talking about euthanasia, and the student gave me, it's like my dad says in Spanish, el que coge la pata es tan culpable como el que mata la vaca. And I was like, oh, I never heard that, but that's great. And I translated for everybody. It's like, you see in Latin America, not much on animal ethics, but this is great. And here's what it means. And I'm trying to show them the diversity that could be and the points in common. So instead of so it was kind of like a really nice transformation system. So yes, I do use Spanish. If there's somebody who doesn't speak Spanish in the group, I do not do it because I think it's very impolite and aggressive to limit somebody from being able to communicate. But I think speaking Spanish is great. And I think it's part of true multiculturalism, to speak the language, to show the ideas of the language, to show the idiosyncrasies and the weirdness that this world is, because I think that enriches us much more.
Gabby, I'm glad that you are back. The question that Maria was kind of answering is it said, I want to know how others feel about speaking Spanish in the workplace.
Well, actually, I do speak Spanish with people who I know speak Spanish. But I don't take for granted that every Latino here in Texas or Latinx person speaks Spanish. However, I do use Spanish. I speak it with everyone. Again, I know that does speak the language. I mix sometimes, words. And again, it's different because when I was working in Minnesota, I was the only Latina person right there, pretty much. And so the use of the language, was with home, but here I do. And, I'm grateful because I have a colleague that during those first weeks, somebody introduced me to her, and she immediately started speaking in Spanish to me, and she sort of gave me the message too that I could, and that there are other people who does it. So that to me was very powerful.
Thank you. So we are getting close to time, but we still have time for one more question. And I saved this one for last because I would like to hear back from everyone. It says, how do we best support the mental health of our colleagues of color? Many of us are wearing multiple hats, such as being a student, an employee, a parent, a spouse, the manager, the filler, etc. And so what can we do to support mental health for females of color?
I think, and I realize that many of us wear lots of hats. I can relate. I had 4 children, and student the entire time I was have been working, and so because I love education, and I just want to develop professionally. So I would say that allyship that Chelsea spoke about earlier is important. And when you see things, say something, and let them know that you're there as a listening ear. Don't try to figure anything out with them, but just let them know, I'm here. There's no need to respond, but I'm here for you. And that's it. And so I think that takes that stigma out. Maybe if there was a question if you were an ally or not before, that takes that question mark away. So just a simple message, I think. And then as far as the self-care piece goes, I think that's very individual for them and what they do for self-care. And so shopping is what I love to do, but I'm sure others do other things, but I'll leave the floor.
Yes, I was going to say the exact same thing that Tess said. And at one point in time, I was all of those things. I was in the doctoral program. I was pregnant. I already had a child. I have a husband, on and on and on and on and on. And it was very hard to juggle. And I want to hone in on the self-care. I never thought that I could take care of myself. I thought I had to be superwoman, which we are superwomen for all that we do. But I never thought, take a day off, Chelsea, and sleep. You know what I mean? Don't go and stay up until 8 p.m. to get the report in. And I think that hurt me in the long run. It also took me a long time to get my dissertation done. I probably could have cut that time down in half if I would have just said, let me set some priorities and let me figure out what's most important right now. And my health and my wellness mentally and physically has to be a priority. Otherwise, I can't be there for the people that I, support. I do love the things that we're doing now at the institution. Like I'm part of the Elevate Challenge that's going on, the little walking challenge. And so I think joining those opportunities, that's something I wouldn't have done before, but I'm part of a group and probably not going to win, but I get out there and try to get my steps in every day. And so, yeah, the wellness walks. And so if you have those types of opportunities, take them. Even though you think you can't fit it in, Whatever it is that you do to have quiet time or to just be still or to read, or if you enjoy movies or shopping, it's so important that we do that. And I love that I do have my colleagues that will say, Chelsea, you need to take a day off and go sit down. You know what I mean? They're checking me with that. But I think we have to allow ourselves to have that time, because we want to do it all, and we can do it all. We can, but we have to take care of ourselves as well. So that's my answer.
Go ahead.
Maria, you want to go ahead?
Go ahead, Gabriela.
Thank you. I agree with that, with all the statements that my colleagues mentioned. It's very important that we take care of ourselves. And I had a situation earlier in the semester. I taught the whole summer. Then I started almost without, any transition into the fall. And I was just, I couldn't even stand myself, basically. I was like at a level of aggressiveness and mixed with almost crying all the time. And it was my mentor because we meet every other week, who said, I think you're tired. And she having somebody, and this is how it's so important to talk and communicate with other women. Women who, I've always felt this, I have this feeling of community with women of color who would understand what you're going through, and to have somebody that you can talk to. Sometimes that's the thing we need, and to sort of make you step back and say, okay, yes, you're right. I need to take a break. I need to sleep this weekend. I need to take a whole long weekend doing nothing. Everything else can wait, because there will always be students' demands. There will always be students' questions. And also something that resonates with me is the fact that there is a time on Fridays that I don't check emails until the following day or until Sunday. And I communicate that to the students, because even when the semester starts, like, I'm a human being, and sometimes that gets into making you exhausted. And then there are all the other things that are crucial and important and connected with our social justice roles that we won't be able to do if we are not okay, and if we are overwhelmed and overworked. So it is something for us in higher ed that we need to learn to do. It's to set up the boundaries and articulate them and being explicit about it. But again, it's crucial to have other women that you can talk to have even a shoulder to cry on, really. And to me, it's always been so powerful and helpful.
So let me address this question from a slightly different angle. I wanna make a call for anybody who's attending this seminar to, if you are in a position of administrative power somehow, that let's help and let's work together to make this a better place where we don't have to start finding the strategies to cope. So for example, when I had my son, my chair basically said, oh no, Maria, don't worry about your research. You can do research while the baby sleeps. Whereas a baby knows how ridiculous this is. So I've been working a lot with Faculty Senate, and unfortunately it was torn down, but I'm working to try to get it approved again, to work with both faculty and staff to get a parental leave in place so we don't have to put ourselves in a vulnerable position to negotiate that. I find it very frustrating that in the current climate with COVID and all of that, women are taking larger responsibilities, for example, with child education. And of course, because of that, our work is going to diminish, even in all sorts of kinds, like working remotely, research, teaching. And then, of course, if we don't pay attention to these issues later on, when the administration comes in and evaluate your performance, they're going to say, oh, but I'm so sorry, Maria. Look, I understand, but everybody went through COVID. And look, your male colleague published this many articles. Or I imagine that if you are staff, your male colleague, look how many achievements they did and finish all these projects successfully and measure them with outcomes and deliverables, famous word. And you have not done that enough. So I think that one thing we should do for each other's mental health is, if you are in a position where you can advocate, please advocate and teach and make change. On my hand, again, I'm working very hard in Senate with other people. Contact your Senate or your staff council and help them advocate. If you have a power of decision, do it. On a personal level, I think all the advice is great. I would only add one thing. Don't be afraid of getting mental health help. These are really hard times, and be honest with your feelings. It is okay to be angry. It is okay to be sad. It is okay to be overwhelmed. It is okay to want to yell and punch everybody you're seeing. Don't do it, but it's okay to feel that way and give permission to feel that way. And if you need, we have in this university a great program that includes mental health. Use it. There is nothing wrong with that. These are people that are trained for that. Find somebody that you're comfortable. Some people are horrible. I love therapy. I've been in therapy many years. I went to this woman who wanted to put me in Prozac. It's like, you're crazy. I want to talk. I don't want medication. Move on and find somebody that actually understands you. I have one that is fantastic. I just need to say oppression, discrimination, and she gets me. I don't need to explain anything more. Don't be afraid of mental health. Use it. It's there. We pay for it. Might as well do a telehealth. They're doing it without having face-to-face. This is a resource for you. Not the counseling center. Use the professional help, because the counseling center sometimes are students who are still in training and may not be able still to grasp with the complexities of what we're talking about today. But I would highly recommend that use that resource is there as well.
I second that, and I also do therapy. And it's been, I started basically when COVID hit. And again, it's a source of support. I am working with somebody who has had experience in higher education, so she gets it. And I also want people to demystify that you don't go to therapy because you're crazy. You go to therapy because you understand what's going on. And that's basically, so I detail that. It's health includes mental health.
I was going to say the same thing, Tiffany. There's a big national, local push to destigmatize, specifically for people of color, getting mental health professionally, mental professional health. And so that may be a topic for one of your future sessions, because I think destigmatizing that and letting us lean into it is healthy to get mental health wellness help is a good thing. And I've been seeing that all across from different constituents across the state, and nationally.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank y'all so much. I still had like 2 pages of questions. And so we actually are doing a deep dive conversation. So guess when you signed in to talent management to sign up for this session, you probably noticed that there is another session on October 29th. And that is a deep dive. It's getting into all of the resources and action items that we didn't even have time to discuss today. We spent a lot of time today talking about personal experiences, which is what we really wanted to focus on. But New Epps, who is the Assistant Director in the Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion, is going to host host our deep dive session on October 29th. And so it'll be an opportunity for us to talk about some resources and those action items that we weren't able to discuss today. So that is open in talent management. That will also be hosted on Zoom if you would like to sign up for that. To the panelists, thank y'all so much. I know that sometimes it can be difficult to share your personal experiences, and especially during kind of the racial climate that we're in. And so thank you so much for being here. And then for everyone who hopped on today, we are recording this session. And so if you would like to get access to it, we are going to post it on the We Lead website, and or if you would like to share it with anyone else who wasn't here today. And then we had a couple of people who weren't members. And so in the chat, I have dropped the We Lead website where the application can be found. It is an employee resource group, so no fees or anything like that for you to join. And so again, thank you everyone for being here, and we look forward to seeing y'all again. Thanks, y'all. Bye.